Think Mark Hamill in the first Star Wars movie. You know, that first half where he's like, he's got that whiny voice. And Mark has specifically said that he chose that to communicate the immaturity.
I think he did it just to annoy people, but that's maybe just... Hi, I'm Teresa, and welcome to Cocooncast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. We will be discussing the new movie Oppenheimer, and on our Retro Rewind, we will also be discussing October Sky.
We also have some surprising Hollywood news.
Bob Iger is doubling down with Disney, and Christopher Nolan is trading convenience for creativity.
Great. Let's get started, Rebecca. Let's talk about Oppenheimer.
Robert Oppenheimer has always been 2 steps ahead of everyone else, and they know it too. When his government comes calling in his talents to coordinate one last full measure to end the greatest war they'll ever know, Oppenheimer must come to terms with a world that will be galvanized and forged by his actions, if there is one left to live in.
Rebecca, let's talk about Oppenheimer. We both decided to go see this movie and discuss it. And tell me why you were thinking it was a great movie to choose for this week.
Well, first of all, I want to remind our cinema community that Teresa and I choose the movies together.
That is correct.
I personally chose this movie because I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan. I'm a huge proponent of his historical works being his best works. And I wanted to see how he took Oppenheimer's very difficult legacy at the time of this airing. We're airing this in 2023.
Yes.
And Oppenheimer has considered to be a hero and a villain in many parts of the world. So I wanted to see how Nolan would tackle this as a character study. This also includes some of Nolan's frequent collaborators, so I was really excited to see that as well.
Obviously, if you know anything about Robert Oppenheimer, you understand the historical piece, not just the character side, not just him as a person in terms of his contribution to nuclear weapons, his contribution to, obviously, the Manhattan Project, which this movie, it's interesting. You and I, Rebecca, had spoke about it, that it is a movie about the story of the Manhattan Project, but it's also a character study. It's very much diving deep into who he is as a person, his relationships with his children, with his wives, with his colleagues, with other people in his life.
I think the other thing that it's easy to see, especially where we live, the scientific community really owes a lot to Oppenheimer. It feels like I can't walk down the street in some ways without running into some form of his legacy.
And that's a good point, because I think in our area where we are, that's true, that there's a very direct link to him and his work, his legacy. But even if that's not your experience, maybe you live in a smaller town, maybe you live outside of a large metropolitan area, I would say I think Nolan breaks down Oppenheimer to the point where I think a typical average person would enjoy the movie from a character perspective, understand the history, even if they had no history going into that. Would you agree with that? Or
I think so. And Nolan's really excellent at making characters relatable into big, extraordinary situations that you wouldn't think would be relatable.
That's true, to the average person, because are you a nuclear physicist or...
No, I'm on a YouTube reviewing movies with you.
Correct. So that's not our experience. However, I felt that I could understand, even when he's scribbling things on the chalkboard, I don't think I knew what much of that meant. However, I felt very included. The movie was 3 hours. To me, I was engaged for the entire 3 hours.
I was really excited to see this movie, partially because I wanted to see how Nolan takes his signature style and translates it to this. And that's why I chose this for cinema community. It's also taken them 3 years for this movie to come out. This movie was the subject of a huge bidding war when the screenplay was first announced.
And Nolan wrote the screenplay.
That's correct. Nolan wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
So I was really interested to see this, and then, as everybody knew, the world was kind of put on hold for the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So it's part of a how's it going to pan out? Has anything changed kind of thing. Is this still the Nolan that I know?
And that's interesting because as we're talking about the global pandemic that affected all of us very much in the same way, and I'm not comparing war to a pandemic. However, the impact was so great. It's a fair question to say, did Christopher Nolan change? And how did he change? And would that be evident in the movie? And you and I talk about Christopher Nolan. We like him a great deal. So I think there's a lot of goodwill going into the theater saying, oh, I'm excited about seeing this movie. I was very excited, even though it was a heavy topic.
It's a heavy topic. And I believe Nolan had the gravitas to address this topic respectfully.
That's a good point. So would you say, Rebecca, it lived up to your expectations of what you thought it would be?
Yes. There's a few directing choices that I wouldn't have made, but for the most part, it lived up to what I expected from Nolan. And there's a couple scenes that took it further than I was expecting and was happy it went there.
And honestly, in talking about why we chose it, we deliberately choose not to read early reviews, too much information about it. So we go in blind. Is that still your, So I think that's important for our cinema community to understand that we watch the movie, we then review it a few hours later.
Yes.
So it's fresh in our minds. However, it's not, sometimes it's not fully put together for us. It's going to see the movie, thinking about, talking about it, and then sitting with our cinema community and encouraging your participation to hear what you experienced it as.
Well, and especially with a director so influential as Nolan driving the conversation for American film.
Correct. No, and I would agree with that. And there was actually, what surprised me too, that there was some humor in it. They actually found a way to work in some humor that didn't feel distracting, it didn't feel off-putting to me.
Yeah. And I'd like our cinema community to comment below too. Is Nolan one of your favorite directors as well? Is this kind of like a flash in the pan for you? We want to hear from you. What do you think about how Oppenheimer has stormed the box office for you?
Well, and I know our family has been fans of Christopher Nolan since the beginning, back in Memento, back in 2000, his first movie. Remember your dad had seen that when he was over in Australia.
I remember Dad talking about it with you and trying to explain the non-linear structure. It was kind of an interesting conversation.
It's an interesting conversation, but it was a great movie.
It was fantastic. All these years later when I was allowed to watch it.
Yes, that's true.
It was very interesting to see how it impacted your sense of cinema, but also the global sense of cinema as well.
Well, and when we say, why did we choose this movie? The honest answer is, obviously, Oppenheimer is an interesting person. As you talked about the controversy between, is he vilified? Is he a hero? Based on time, cultures, different people's experience with him. And I know for me, I was very excited that we were able to review and discuss the Christopher Nolan movie with our cinema community. And as you said, to hear their experience with Christopher Nolan, or even their experience with Oppenheimer. Maybe they've had the opportunity to see it since we've recorded this.
That's very true.
Rebecca, we were talking about some of the themes and how everything came together, and it didn't feel as if by accident those things were happening.
There's very clearly scenes in movies like this where you have this big historical event happening involving these major players that it starts to feel contrived. In this sequence, it didn't feel contrived. It felt very natural. It felt like it was supposed to happen as it did. And it didn't feel hokey to me. One of the things I was really impressed with the choice that Nolan made was he talks a lot about the characters' inner lives. Not just the outer lives, like I'm going to go build a bomb. He deals with the ethical and the emotional implications of this. So much so it feels like a character in this movie is the emotional standards that the people are holding themselves to. In fact, there are several points where characters will walk out and say, I want nothing to do with this. How are we going to consider how this is affecting everyone else? And I think a lesser director would have minimized that.
That's true. Or changed it, or as you said, not contrived, but manipulate the audience to the point of feeling, whereas maybe in terms of maybe that was how they were feeling, so they were projecting that onto the audience versus allowing the audience to feel as they felt based on what he presents.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy is doing an excellent job as Robert Oppenheimer. Emily Blunt as Kitty Oppenheimer provides an alternate perspective, but it's not at the expense of Oppenheimer himself, which I was really impressed with. Robert Downey Jr. arguably can be considered the villain in the piece, but it's never so obvious he's the villain. It's, well, what about this? And he starts to kind of create like a medium between the two Oppenheimers.
And I think there's a part where, and I'm thinking about different cast, knowing that Nolan oftentimes brings people back as an ensemble or people that we've seen before in other earlier Nolan films. I appreciated the fact that even people that had smaller parts, I felt I connected with them. It didn't feel like just a blip or they were inconsequential. They were all vital to the story. And even though we'd say, wow, 3-hour movie, does the man edit? I would say, exactly. I would say 3 hours, but every minute made sense to me.
Yes. And it wasn't overwhelming to me. I wasn't overwhelmed by the character choices being made.
Or the actors that portrayed the actual people.
Yeah, the casting department picked very wisely with this film.
Well, and you had made a point, too, that the various scientists at different points, different people that may have felt more background, were named by name.
Yes.
They weren't, oh, scientist number 5. It was, oh, hey, look, this is who this person is, and this is their connection. And I think Nolan has a way of putting the dots really close to one another, not to the point where you feel patronized, like, gosh, he doesn't think we can get this. It's, I want to bring you into where I am, and I want you to understand, and I want you to know that person the way that I know them to be.
I thought it was really cool, especially if you're not into the history of science. You became very aware. You're like, oh, it's this person. And if you don't know who this person is, like some of our cinema community, you still got excited. You started to see the emotional reactions that some of the other characters had with them.
Yes, I definitely appreciated that. And just to remind our cinema community, it's R-rated, and Nolan filmed it in IMAX. We saw it in IMAX.
Yes, that was a conscious decision that we chose to, given that Nolan has specifically said that IMAX is his format of choice for this film.
And I agree that that was worth seeing.
Yes.
Do we have any questions from the box?
Was this movie too dry in terms of content, or did it feel interactive for the audience?
I think it was very interactive. There were multiple levels besides the acting, besides the directing. In fact, I want to spotlight the music. Ludwig Göransson did an excellent job. He's done both scores for Black Panther. A lot of our cinema community may also know him for the Creed franchise and also the score from The Mandalorian.
Yes,
he's been doing that since
the
show started.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to spotlight that specifically because it really allowed you to create an emotional space for these characters. And I know it could be taken for granted that these characters are real human beings, therefore we should have residual space for them, but it's so easy to put something like this in the past. But when you have all these elements combining together, you want to resonate with the characters. I also want to spotlight Hoyt van Hoytema, who has also worked with Nolan. He did a phenomenal job on Dunkirk.
Yes, that was a great movie.
Easily some of the best aerial dogfight scenes I've seen in like the last 20 years. And he really took that perspective, but he really honed in on the space that the characters inhabited, but he also knew when to pull back and let the spectacle of the practical effects take over.
Well, and I think that there was a part too, and we hadn't discussed it, but really briefly, that the movie was partially black and white and partially in color.
Yes.
And
that feels very Memento.
It does, doesn't it? And I appreciated that because it was a way to distinguish what was present, what was past.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, your dad, hot guy in the box, does not appreciate flashback scenes that feel chaotic.
It did not feel disjointed to me.
It did not feel disjointed. It was very easy to tell what timeline was he in.
I was also really impressed with the lack of disjointedness as well, is because there's several scenes that are shown from different perspectives that we first see, say, in black and white, and then it transitions to the color timeline, the color perspective.
Correct, and that allowed me, so to me, does it feel interactive? That allowed me to stay engaged and interact with the movie versus go, oh, this is a dry movie about the past. It's that time of the show where we talk about our moth ratings. Rebecca, on a scale of 1 to 5 moths, flying around, waiting to land. Where would your moth land today on Oppenheimer?
My moths are landing at a 4.
Oh, wow, 4. And top reason for a 4 moth rating?
I believe this can be accessible to a wide variety of audiences, whether you're looking for a simple narrative or a complex narrative. Nolan provides a cohesive experience on either end of the spectrum.
I would agree with that. So my moth rating would be 4 and a wing, so 4.5. I can't disagree. Everything that you just said. I think that the half to me it's a really great movie. It's not a perfect movie. A 5 moth is a pretty hard one for me to find at this point, but I would say a 4.5. It is a solid movie. As you said, it's a great character study. It's well acted. It's well directed. It's well filmed. It's a great movie, and I would encourage our cinema community to not only see it, but comment below once you've had the opportunity to see it and share your moth rating and share maybe some elements that maybe we've not discussed, or tell us what you think if you agree or disagree with some of our comments.
If you enjoyed our review on Oppenheimer, please like, which helps more viewers find our cinema community, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming reviews. And please share with your friends. Now, it's time for our Retro Rewind. This week, we chose October Sky.
It seems no matter where Homer Hickam turns, his life turns to coal. When his father runs the mine the town depends on, Homer finds his true passion in rocketry. With the help of the people in their lives, both men try to step forward in their lives together as each twist threatens to push them apart. Rebecca, we chose October Sky this week as our Retro Rewind. Tell the cinema community a little bit about why you chose this movie.
I chose October Sky for this week's Retro Rewind with Teresa's help because not only does it discuss the emotional resonance that science has in the community that it's being studied, but also the very practical resonance that it can have in the lives of the people studying it. And I felt that Homer Hickam's story is an excellent example of this without being too emotionally heavy with, say, the topic of the atomic bomb.
Right. We're talking rockets versus atomic bombs. Slight difference. This, well, as we were talking about with Oppenheimer, there is the character study, and this is a character study not only on Homer Hickam, but also his dad. His dad played by Chris Cooper.
Yes.
And Homer
correct.
Hickam is Jake Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal, yes.
Yes. I never say that right.
I never spell it right, so
I
at
was
least
going to
you
say,
get-
I can spell it well. I don't say it right. But he was 17, same age as Homer Hickam in the movie.
That's correct. Homer Hickam in the movie is 17.
Correct. And Jake is also 17 as an actor.
I think that adds a specific tone choice
Yes, agreed.
in this movie that you wouldn't find, say, in an actor that was aged up to be their mid-20s in these biopics. It gets a little bit annoying. Feels like they're trying to act younger than they are. Think Mark Hamill.
They kind of are.
No, but okay. Think Mark Hamill in the first Star Wars movie. You know, that first half where he's like, he's got that whiny voice. And Mark has specifically said that he chose that to communicate the immaturity.
I think he did it just to annoy people, but that's maybe just me. But no, I agree with that. And choosing the movie, even though Oppenheimer did not discuss the parent-child relationship, this is a lot about a younger man growing up having a different view of life and his future than his dad has.
Well, it's also about the community that finds themselves drawn to this young man.
Correct.
And how they find ways to support him or lack thereof. How they start to grapple with what this means for them.
And in our cinema community, I'm sure some people have picked up on the fact that you and I are mother-daughter. Mm-hmm. As I point to you, mother-daughter. But there is always that piece. And as an adult, you've made different decisions than I would have made for you. Not that they're bad, they're actually really good. But Chris Cooper's character reminds me as a parent, you have to let your children find their way.
One of the things that I really like about this movie is that Chris Cooper's character of Homer Hickam Sr.
Yes.
is deceptively complex.
Very much.
It's so easy to look at this movie and think, oh, he's just some cranky old guy. He doesn't like rockets and stuff. But it's like, he's worried about Homer. It's a very real concern that's affecting him and how he treats his son.
Well, and I know you and I, one of the discussion points we had is it's not, no one is vilified, again, which I appreciate. I don't appreciate to me, that's a simple movie. I agree with that. And I appreciated the fact that as a 17-year-old, at one point I was 17 also. So I know that there were things my dad was doing or things behind the scenes I did not know or understand. Over time, you could see Homer seeing his father differently. Some misunderstandings where he thought his dad had actually punished one of his workers because of a decision that Homer had made. And he realized that, wait a minute, he didn't actually know. His dad didn't tell him until it came later. He said, no, actually, this is what happened. He didn't have to justify. He just said, hey, this isn't what happened.
And some of that comes from the character that is being perceived as being punished, too. It's not, we're supposed to take Chris Cooper's word that he's a good guy.
Correct. He showed himself to be, when one of his friends was being harmed, how his dad stepped up. And you could start to see the it was kind of a push-pull relationship with the two of them. Mm-hmm. We're talking about pulling apart. It's they're starting to come together, and then something happens, they get pulled apart, and then they get pushed back together and back and forth. And you could see that with a parent-child relationship.
The nice thing I liked about that, in this movie specifically, is that it didn't feel contrived. It wasn't, oh, they're getting along, this is too much, we can't have a nice, friendly plot. It's organic conflict.
Well, and to say this is a true story. So Homer Hickam was and ultimately became a NASA engineer. Mm-hmm. So this is his true life story. This is actually based on a book of his experience. So to say it was contrived or it was, no, this is actually taken from his book.
That's true.
And that, I think, makes a difference. Obviously, that's compelling. It's a true story. It has a happy ending in that respect. The other reason I chose the movie is this is the first movie you've seen. This is the first movie
Yes.
this is the first movie we took you to. You were 5? You were 5 in a few months.
I was very young, yes.
You were very young. Your dad and I actually went to the movie first to check it out. It's a PG movie. However, you were still pretty young.
This deals with some very mature themes as well, too.
Well, and that's always the question with parents, right? What movie do you take your children to? What movie do you go see? And first movie is a big piece. We definitely encourage our cinema community. First movie you've ever seen, let us know about that. Because we all have our first movie that is meaningful to us, in my opinion. And taking you to see it, you were really into space at that time, and there were some things we do believe that probably went over your head a little bit. But I also think the story, the acting was very powerful. I just remember you were sitting next to your dad and you were just like glued to a little popcorn watching. And I don't think you moved the whole time. It was that compelling. Yeah. So clearly there's an emotional element in a movie. But since then, we purchased the movie. We've seen the movie. I think you were saying we've seen it, what, 6 or more times?
Easily 6 times just on our home screenings.
Sure. I think we've seen it more than that, to be honest with you. The fact that I know the lines tells me I probably have seen it more than 6 times. So there's definitely an emotional component to it, but I just appreciated, I know that, as we were talking about with Oppenheimer, we could have got lost in the space. We could have got lost in the rockets that Homer is building, the young man Homer is building. But it really was about the relationships. We were talking about loss. There were several deaths and impending deaths. And you think about a young 17-year-old having to make decisions. Does he go work in the mine with his father? Does he drop out of school? What does he do when he doesn't understand the math to build the rockets that he so wants to build to get out of Colwood, West Virginia, which is a small town where, as we said, his father ran the mine. That was the expectation. And that's not what he wants. That's a heavy, heavy topic.
I agree, and I think that if you're not familiar with this film, it's just easy to go, it's a bunch of guys building rockets in their backyard blowing up a fence.
And that is a part of it.
It's a very enjoyable part of it, but it's also a disservice to the movie because there's very emotional layers, as Teresa has been saying,
Sure.
with the parental relationship, even with some of the teacher-student dynamics, and even some of his colleagues at the same age as well.
Yes, and Jake feels 17. There's not a part where I say, oh, he feels older. He felt young. And I appreciated that. So even though the kid is bright, there's one other young man, his name is Quentin. He's clearly, I think he became a civil engineer or chemical engineer, I believe, in I say in real life, meaning as he matured, that's what he became. But it was interesting because he felt like the person who you would see him getting out of Colwood. But he had some challenges, so he was there. And he wanted to leave also. And it's not, if you're from a small town, you want to leave always. But it's, what do you do when your aspirations are higher than what's available to you?
Or even if your aspirations are different.
Or different. That's a fair assessment. I like the different. Do we have any questions from the box?
Now that you've seen this movie, I don't know, for the 8th time, were there things that you hadn't noticed that you missed previously?
I know for me that the topic of death is something that I find in a lot of movies that I like, but I hadn't realized how close to home it had hit in this movie. There's one character that dies early on, and Homer grapples with it in a very rudimentary way, but then you see another character kind of journeying toward it, and he changes. So it really shows his maturity in that perspective.
I agree with that. I had not thought about death as far as a 17-year-old thinking, this young guy has experienced death, impending death, and it's more than just a coming-of-age movie. Meaning understanding, just having the comprehension that he had at such a young age. I had not connected the actor and the actual Homer as 17. They were both 17. That was surprising to me to think about that, and to be able to act that accurately was surprising to me.
Well, my understanding is that Homer was younger in the real events. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to see that Homer's age being changed for this movie mm-hmm. allowed greater creative freedom that you wouldn't see necessarily in a younger Homer.
Correct, and we wouldn't have known that. So that makes sense that maybe they bridged that a little bit more, so it did feel like, as you said, the maturity, meaning the maturity was at the ending. The beginning, if you were younger, it would take a few years to come to that. But he was able to come to that. So I think that would be the part, as you were saying, I think that would be the biggest part that I had not noticed before. It's that time of the show where we do our moth ratings. Rebecca, 1 to 5 moths, flying, flying, flying. What would you say your moth rating is for October Sky?
3.5 for me.
Wow. What's the number one reason for a 3.5?
I believe this movie could have dived more deeply into some of the topics that it was discussing. Some of it felt lighter than it probably should have, but it still started to get there. It just didn't complete the jump for me.
Okay, so 3.5. I would say I was leaning a little higher, but now I'm questioning. I don't know if I should ask you why. Once I ask you why, then I go, ooh, I know.
But aren't you glad you asked me why? Because then you can think about your rating.
But I'm confident of my rating, and then I ask you, and then I go, oh, wait a minute, maybe no. All right, I'm going to hang on my 4.
Okay.
And I'll say one reason why I chose a 4. The acting pushed it over to me because this, even though it's a true story, it's a compelling story, like the themes, topic, all these good things. If the acting would have been poor or substandard, in my mind, I would have given it a 3.5. But for that reason, because the acting was so good, I definitely would give it a 4. And I'm confident on that now.
That's all I ask.
That's all I ask. Okay. If you've seen Oppenheimer or October Sky and you want to watch or share our review with a friend, head over to our companion channel, Cocooncast Clips, where we take this show and cut it up into bite-sized clips. Perfect for when you're short on time or just want to share a snack-sized review with your cinema community. This is the time in the show where we talk about who we are not sponsored by. Rebecca, do you know we are not sponsored by Kingsford Charcoal?
We're not sponsored by Kingston?
No. You were thinking of the computer memory that your dad uses. We're talking about Kingsford Charcoal. That's a different product.
Very different.
Do you know much about Kingsford Charcoal?
I just know I can light stuff on fire with it. That's all I know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you just know that they haven't sponsored us. See, that's where I know they don't sponsor us.
Well, now I know they're not sponsoring
They're
us.
not.
You just told me. They're not sponsoring us. How dare they?
How dare they not? Let's talk about the history of Kingsford Charcoal.
Sounds awesome. Let's go.
So 1990, back in the day, back before you were born, I was born, Dad was born. We're not sure about Grandpa, but, he's a little old.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. So Edward Kingsford was just a guy, not the charcoal guy, just the guy. And so Henry Ford came up to him and said, hey, I'm building auto plants and I need your help. I need wood. I need lots of wood to supply the wood to, help him build his cars. So he did that. So Kingsford comes up with, all this, wood and timber and all this great stuff. And then Henry Ford came back to him and he said, hey, what are you going to do with all that wood waste?
That's a good question.
I know, right?
Now I want to know. What did he do?
Well, funny you should ask. Kingsford, who is not sponsoring us today, actually decided to use the wood waste and then the charcoal.
Okay.
And made these nice little pellets that would burn.
Okay.
So this is what we're doing. And so originally Ford, it was under his name, but this guy's actual name is Kingsford. And
so it's not a Henry Ford joke? Like he's the king of Fords and wood pulp? None of that.
None of it. This is a legit guy, right?
This is a legit guy.
And so they started to make these little pellets. And they renamed it Kingsford after Kingsford, which was kind of nice of them. And they've been around forever and ever and ever. They're actually made from a little bit of charcoal and hardwoods, softwoods, spruce, pine.
You name a wood,
history.
it's there.
It's there. Made in the United States. And they make these nice little briquettes. You've seen them in little, trying to visualize, kind of like, Jeff Goldblum's head, only, they burn. And they make products like crazy now. So you would think they could sponsor us, right? They're making money. They had Ford behind them. I think Clorox bought them in like 99. So they're a company. They're legit. Most people know of this company. So you would think Kingsford Charcoal, they make things. Do you think they make more than charcoal?
I don't know that much about them, so please tell me.
Well, what have we established today?
That they have a lot of wood. It's very thick.
It's very thick, and they don't sponsor Cocooncast. This is what we know about Kingsford Charcoal, but there's actually more. Wait. They make baked beans,
Oh, that sounds good.
canned baked beans, smoky beans, chili, smoky chili. Again,
Kind of goes with the baked beans.
kind of goes with baked bean, canned. The charcoal. Do you think they're still making charcoal?
Oh, yeah.
There. 16 varieties
Holy
of
cow.
charcoal. They have, the white and the blue bag, the red, white, and blue bag, right? Very patriotic charcoal. They have one, which I thought was fascinating. You actually put the whole bag in your barbecue and you just go, and then it'll go.
Oh, that's convenient.
That's just it. You just light the whole bag and then you walk away. And guess what? They actually sell the lighters that you can light to light the bag that go.
Oh, so it's a package deal.
No. It's separate.
Oh, okay.
No. That's where you'd be wrong. It's not a bundle. It's a separate bag. They also have a professional grade charcoal, which, what do you think that means?
A lot more wood percentage? I don't know.
Nah, it burns hotter.
Okay.
So if it's professional grade, I guess you need, hot stuff. They're telling me this. I'm believing them. They also have, this is the fun one, is the match light, which means you don't put, if you have your little barbecue and you're putting your little briquettes and everything in there, you actually don't need lighter fluid. You just need your lighter, your Kingsford lighter.
So you just need flame, and then it will go up in flames.
And it'll go up in flames, but no lighter fluid.
Huh, that's interesting.
I think they're very innovative, other than the fact that they're not sponsoring us. They're pretty impressive over here. They have different flavored charcoal, not that you should eat charcoal. Okay, kids, don't eat charcoal. But the charcoal adds the flavor.
Okay, yeah,
right?
like the smoke adds the flavor.
Correct. So they have Memphis barbecue.
Okay.
Which sounds pretty tasty. Bourbon barbecue. Say that 3 times fast. Yeah, no, right? Garlic, onion, paprika. So they couldn't
that's
decide.
really spicy there.
Yeah, that's a lot of going on there, right? They have cumin chili.
Okay, that sounds good.
And then basil, sage, thyme, because, I don't know, they need something.
Because you never have enough time to barbecue.
Exactly. That's what I'm noticing. Apparently not to sponsor us either, because they're not taking the time to sponsor us. And if that were not enough, they have wood pellets, the little tiny ones where you go.
Oh, so they still make those?
They still make those. My dad used to do the wood pellets.
Okay.
That was kind of, I know, it was like a dad thing. I don't know what that was about. He seemed to like the
Dad's
wood pellets.
barbecuing sandals. Seems to go together.
Yeah, exactly. This was my dad, right? So they have cherry wood, hickory wood, and they have one, it's like 100% hardwood, which apparently creates less ash.
Huh. I would have not guessed that, actually.
They know it all. They're the expert on what they do. But do you think that they want to sponsor us? Yeah, we're over here talking. We're talking Coalwood, West Virginia, with Homer Hickam. We like coal. We don't hate coal. Come on. No, we don't like you. No, we're not going to sponsor you today. Thanks for thinking of us, but no. Then they have other products, right? Because you're going to need a place to store your little briquettes, so you have to have the little storage. It looks kind of like a little Tupperware thing. Not to be confused with the
Tupperware, who also did not sponsor us for our Asteroid City.
That's right. Boy, we're having it, I tell you. And they have lighters, lighter fluid, grill cover. I mean, you name it, they have it. Flavor enhancers that are not the wood, just kind of. Yeah. So you think they're doing anything? Do you think they're sponsoring us? Do you think they're like, that cocooncast, boy, they're so nice. They actually like our product. They're promoting coal. They probably like Homer Hickam. Maybe they sponsored him when he
That's a good question. Now I want to know that.
I want to know. And Ford, right? Some people love
don't
Ford.
They have like a mentorship program where they do sponsor people?
They do, actually. It's called Preserve the Pit.
Oh, I like the name. It's very catchy.
Yeah, very catchy. And so their whole thing is they're trying to preserve Black African American barbecue, right?
Okay.
In the United States. Noble cause, right? It's great. 10, 15 hours a month. They're mentoring them. They say, hey, fly, come see us. We will sponsor you. We will support you. But do they sponsor Cocooncast?
No.
Still no. And they have this whole thing. Go on our website, talk to us, come join us, fill out applications. Do you think they'd call us, talk to us, sponsor us? No. Still no. So thank you so much for not sponsoring us, Kingsford. We appreciate you.
It's that time in our show where we hear from you, our cinema community.
Hey, cinema community, we love reading your comments. We would also love to receive a video message from you. Each week, we give you 2 opportunities to send us a video. This week, we're looking for you to send us a video clip where you answer the question, what was the first movie you saw in the theater? Tell us how old you were, where you went, what your experience was like, and we definitely give you extra points for being creative in your video. Second opportunity is for you to send in your review of the new Barbie movie. Next week, we will be reviewing it on Cocooncast, but we would love to hear your 60-second review on the movie also. Just a reminder, for your video, keep your clip to 60 seconds or less. Film it in landscape with good audio and no music. Then send it through email to us at hello@cocooncast.com. If you include your name and your mailing address, you will get a custom Cocooncast sticker pack mailed to you. That's right. When you join our cinema community, we'll send you a nice thank you.
Last week, we asked you to send us a clip answering the question, what is your favorite Disney movie and why? And thank you, cinema community, for hearing us, because let's see what our cinema community has to show us today.
All right. First up, we have Mary Sue. She sent us a video clip from The Happiest Place on Earth. Mary Sue.
Hi, one of my favorite movies is Pirates of the Caribbean, and the reason why I like it is because a lot of the rides at Disneyland were based off movies that have already been made. However, Pirates of the Caribbean was a movie created off of the ride that already existed at Disneyland, and I just find it so exciting how they were able to just take this ride and the different scenes in the ride and to turn it into an entire movie. One of my favorite scenes is when the pirates are in the jail cell and the dog is sitting there holding the keys. And when I saw they put that into the film, I was so excited. It's awesome. Gotta see it.
Check it out. She is a total fan. She's got the hat.
She's even got the pirate ship in the background.
I was going to say, and we know that's not like her backyard, right? That's like Disneyland. No. That was awesome. And we were laughing about the no music. I don't think that she wanted to add that music. That was just a little bit of effect. I don't think she,
that was a nice bit of flair.
That was a nice bit of flair. I loved her Disney spirit, and I love that she loved Pirates of the Caribbean. That is quite the movie, too. And the ride. Love the ride.
Ride's fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary Sue. Next up, we have Jason, who has sent us a clip. Let's see Jason.
Hey, Rebecca and Teresa. My favorite Disney movie is Out of the Ordinary. It's actually National Treasure. I mean, talk about the most fun with treasure hunting, puzzles. I mean, it just kind of unfolds in front of your eyes. And there's always something new and different. And it really scratches my itch for like the Indiana Jones adventurous type, but also the treasure hunting. It's got so much history. Every twist and turn. I really am praying that they come out with a National Treasure 3. That is my favorite Disney movie.
I think Jason likes that movie.
I think he likes it so much he did a visual aid for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you like that movie a lot.
I do. The second one is not as good as the first one and also has Chris Cooper in it.
Oh, yes, my guy. I like Chris Cooper. Here's the theme.
But the first one is a really good example of Disney taking a chance on live action properties.
Yes.
That are original to them. I'd also like to remind our cinema community that there's a National Treasure TV show that a few of my friends have recommended to me. I have not seen it yet, but JMO, I know you've mentioned that you wish there was a National Treasure 3. That should scratch your itch quite nicely. I also recommend the Librarian series.
The Librarian series is good. Well, and I appreciated the fact that he said, hey, I know that this is not maybe the typical Disney movie that people think of. And that's why we're asking you, the cinema community, share with us what your favorite movie is, because one, maybe you've never heard of the National Treasure series, or maybe you've seen it and you haven't really thought about it, or maybe you don't even think, oh my gosh, that's Disney.
I always like to hear from our cinema community because sometimes there's things that I haven't considered, and I like hearing from y'all because maybe there's something that pushes me the edge to try something new. And I know our cinema community really likes deep diving into things and discovering. And this is an excellent way to discover something.
Absolutely. And an endorsement from JMO. Very good. Next, we have Jeff, who is going to share with us his favorite Disney movie. Jeff.
Hey, Rebecca and Teresa, my favorite Disney movie is Swiss Family Robinson. Now, I know that's an oldie, but as a kid growing up, that movie had everything in it that I was looking for. It had action, it had adventure, it had fighting against pirates, it had survival on the island, and it had family and animals all around the place. And it really got me down to thinking, what are the most important things in life? Really, what's the most important things in life? Having family, having fun, having some food on the table, and living a life of action and adventure. So that's one of my favorite Disney movies.
That was awesome. I remember, okay, and here's where it's going to feel like I'm your mother again.
Tends to happen a lot here.
I would say that was one of your favorite books when you were a kid.
Yes.
I mean, you've read that. I can't even tell you how many times. I remember you read that so many times.
It's amazing the cover hasn't fallen off on that book.
That's right. And so you could probably really identify with Jeff.
Yeah. I remember watching the Disney adaptation with several of my friends when I was younger during the summertime when we were off on a school break.
Sure.
It was kind of interesting to see how the movie takes the spirit of the book, but also kind of updates it and gives it more of a thrilling adventure piece to it.
Well, and I heard Jeff say, here's all the things, and here was my takeaway. Here's what was important to me. It actually included, this is how I've chose to live my life. I didn't hear him saying I have wild animals in my backyard. However,
Jeff, if you have wild animals in your backyard, please feel free to send in a picture next week.
Exactly. This is Jeff taming the neighborhood dog who looks a lot like a lion. They'll paint little stripes on the lion. But I do appreciate that there's values that he's imparted, and the movie was enjoyable. And just like we were seeing with JMO, not every person's favorite Disney movie is Snow White or Cinderella, although it could be. That's absolutely fine. But to hear different people's perspective and how it resonates, that's why we love hearing from our cinema community and invite you to be part of it. I appreciated that. All right, last up we have a video clip, and this is from Sean. Sean, tell us your favorite Disney movie.
Hey, Rebecca and Teresa, my favorite Disney movie on the Disney Channel, Disney Plus, is The Greatest Showman. The Greatest Showman has some of my favorite music. Every time I watch it, it makes me feel like I can be somebody and do more with my life. And I love movies that make me want to be better than who I am. And that movie does it. And all of us can be better than who we are. So watch The Greatest Showman.
Wow, he's quite a salesman, isn't he?
I know, he's got that P.T. Barnum spirit right there, just trying to get you to watch the movie.
I'm waiting for him to break out into song. Obviously, he's not at Disneyland, but he looks like he's doing pretty good over there. Looks like he's pretty happy.
Looks pretty relaxed over there. Looks pretty nice mountaineering environment.
Yeah, nice and very chill over there. But you love that movie. You and your dad actually love that movie quite a bit. Not that I don't love it, but I recall you and your dad really resonating with that movie as well.
The music is really cool because I don't know how many people in our cinema community have taken the time to watch Frozen and not have been dragged into it. But if you take the time to listen to the music, it's the same people who did the music.
For Greatest Showman.
Yes, the same husband and wife team. Yeah.
I didn't. Oh, see, this is the thing. Who knew this? Obviously, you did.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Well, and just like Sean was saying, it's inspiring. Jeff was talking about the same thing. It's that inspiring. I could do anything.
Even Mary Sue was talking about how she felt like she was on an adventure, and that excited her. And that's inspiration too, just in a not necessarily obvious way.
And it goes back to our premise that movies are
better together.
So sharing that with our cinema community is so important. If you're video shy, maybe just send us a picture of you. We'd love to see you standing out front of your favorite movie theater with your cinema community. Be sure to tell us who you are. Put in the caption what movie you're going to see. That's a great way to show your cinema community spirit.
Remember, we want to showcase you, our cinema community, on the show next week through some videos and pictures. Please send them in by Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific time for a chance to be on the show.
And now it's time for some Hollywood news. Rebecca here. Bob Wiley is back.
Why'd you need to kick Bob out of the house?
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
I think you mean Bob Iger. He's got his eye on sticking with Disney through 2026.
Oh my. All right. Tell us the story. What's going on over there?
So, you know how we all thought Bob Iger was going to leave?
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
At the end of 2024?
Oh, that's what he said.
Oh, yeah. No, he even said in the New York Times, once I'm gone, I'm gone. You can't go back.
He's never gone.
And yet,
He's back.
Is this some radical new therapy?
Bob Iger is back. All right. And where are you hearing this from?
Jonathan Moreau and Cynthia Littleton had a nice write-up in Variety about this.
Okay.
He's not leaving.
He's never gone.
He's not leaving. All right. So, but he's trimming. He's trimming the
he
Disney
trimmed
budget.
7,000 jobs.
And he's done, right?
Well, that's the hope.
That's the hope, but maybe no. You
Perhaps
don't sound
no.
confident.
So I'm just confused because here's a man that actively says, I'm quitting Disney. I'm stepping down from Disney. His successor, arguably, next to him, looks terrible. And he already looked bad anyways, but...
Well, but you're comparing.
Yes, you're comparing to Bob
Yeah.
to Bob.
Yeah, right? No. Iger is the man.
Yes, and it's so nutty to me that he comes back, says, I'm helping them find a new CEO. It's going to take 2 years, but I'm going to do it. And he goes, never mind, I'm staying. And that's great for the Disney shareholder price, which
Shareholders
jumped up.
love him, right?
Loved him. Went up 10%.
Wow.
After because this was done after closing hours.
Sure. No, but the announcement said something. But the employees, or we should say the laid off employees, probably aren't so thrilled.
I'm just really flabbergasted with Disney at this point because Iger is already digging himself in a hole with some of the comments he's making with a SAG-AFTRA strike. He's not making friends over here.
But
And-
he's leaving, or so he says.
That's the whole point. He's never gone.
At this point, I'm just going to hedge my bets and keep $5 on. He's going to leave when he dies.
Ooh. Wow. I might take you up on that bet.
The other reason this bugs me is Disney owns so much now. It's not just Disney. You have Marvel Studios, you have Marvel Comics. They even bought 20th Century Fox, I should say formerly known as 20th Century Fox, because they're just Century Fox now.
Well, and they have Lucasfilm, correct?
Yes, they have several
Pixar.
properties belonging to Lucasfilm on license, yes.
Correct. Pixar?
Pixar, yes.
Yeah. So, no. And and that's a whole question of as they're absorbing all of these entities and people aren't just handing them to them, they're buying them. It's a question in terms of what's the long-term strategy. Of course, to be a fly on the wall in Bob Iger's office would be interesting, but we don't know.
I would not want to be a board member of Disney right now. I understand it looks great. You're making your money back. But people are starting to think that Disney is too big to exist. Mm-hmm. And this conversation was brought up specifically when they were absorbing a lot more of the smaller film studios.
Correct. No, I remember hearing that as well. So he's not gone.
He's not gone.
He's not gone.
He's back.
He's back. So, do we have any questions from the hot guy in the box today?
Is Disney just biding their time for a new successor to emerge, or should they just stick with Bob Iger and move forward?
I think eventually Bob is going to wear out his welcome. Sure, he's the golden boy right now.
And he has been historically.
Historically speaking, yes.
Let's not lie. He's making them money.
No, he's making them money, but that's not all Disney is. Disney is losing respect from filmmakers.
Sure. No,
especially after the Willow incident, removing shows from platforms that they exclusively own. I know.
Well,
really
we had talked about that back in the day, that he was removing things that have no no recorded anything. They just disappear.
Yeah. Zaslav is doing the same thing at a much larger scale, but Iger arguably said, hey, let's go for it. And then Zaslav is like, I'm going to go for it.
Well, and I would agree with that. And of course, time will tell what will happen next. And this is a continuing story. It's not Bob Iger was there and Bob Iger is now gone. It's he's never gone.
He never leaves.
He never leaves. And the question is, will he leave in a few years?
Well, that's what he said he's doing now, but I'm not so sure given his past track record where he said he really was going to be gone.
Correct. And obviously this is important for our cinema community. Rebecca, what would you say is the most important reason that our cinema community needs to know this?
Bob is the single most identifiable corporate player in Disney now, as of through 2026, not 2024, like was originally discussed.
Sure.
So that means any decisions that are made through Disney, he's going to be the end-all be-all, so to speak. He's going to be the final name on the paper. He's going to be the stamp on the seal of approval.
Well, and he's also a template in terms of as a CEO. What he does, other CEOs, other companies are watching.
He's a bellwether of this economic community.
Correct. So people are watching. So it's not Bob Iger's in the background doing Iger-ish things. It's he's there and other people follow and watch because, as we said, Disney is a large company to the point where they're questioning, is it too large?
I also want to bring up the fact that a lot of the animation community that I've seen has been really just disgusted with Disney's leadership towards special effects industries, as well as the traditional animated studios. So Bob's going to have to deal with that. And as I'm sure a large part of our cinema community is aware, animation is a huge folder in the portfolio of Disney.
Correct.
So this is going to have far-reaching consequences besides 7,000 people being laid off in corporate positions and or their parks departments.
Correct. And it's fair that the shareholders are happy, meaning their rate of return is good, right? That's fair. So I don't disparage them for wanting to make a profit or to be profitable as a company. That's understandable. However, it's at what expense and in what manner.
So I heard you have something a little bit more fluffy.
Fluffy and stuffy. Let's talk. So we were talking about Christopher Nolan. Big fans, obviously. I read an interesting article. It was informative, but it was interesting. Actually, it extends beyond Christopher Nolan. And I actually found it in a kind of an unlikely place. I found it on cnbc.com, not necessarily Variety Hollywood Reporter. So Nicholas Varga wrote a really interesting article about Christopher Nolan. And I'm not sure if you know this, but Christopher Nolan has a reputation for being very low-tech.
Very analog, yes.
Very analog. I think his kids, what do they refer to him as? A Luddite?
Yeah, I heard Nolan complaining that his kids would see him as very low-tech and...
Low-tech, no-tech?
Pretty much. No-tech Nolan.
No-tech Nolan. He has a flip phone. And for reference point, we had a flip phone 15 years ago. My 80-year-old father-in-law has a flip phone. Everyone else we know has a smartphone. But the point that he had, which I actually really liked, and we, as we said earlier in the show, we like Christopher Nolan, so this is not to be disparaging.
This isn't a slam against Nolan.
No, it's an interesting concept because he talked about if he had a smartphone during the lapse, right, he would pick up his phone and play with it and do things and, be distracted. And he said in those moments when he's actually bored or not engaged or distracted, that he said with the phone that he would feel he would be, he gets his best ideas. And for him, that's something good. And there's already different parts about him where he hand delivers scripts versus sending it through email and, things of that nature. So he has his phone where he just makes calls. That's what he does. So I know you and I were talking about Zack Snyder, the director, Man of Steel. He's done other movies, and you had pointed out something really interesting that he has been able to do with his iPhone.
So in 2017, Zack Snyder created this short film called Snow, Steam, Iron. It's available for viewing on Vero. That's the social platform that Zack generally releases all of his news on now.
But that's the comparison of smartphone, not smartphone. And so I don't think it's an industry standard. If anything, I think most people outside of Christopher Nolan, most industries have smartphones. But the thought of, is it distracting? Does it get in the way of doing what you do and doing it well? And do you, it even understanding, my kids think I'm like back in the dark ages. That doesn't seem to faze him much. And it definitely doesn't
he
seem
definitely beats to his own drum.
Correct. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And it could feel silly to go, why are you reporting on Christopher Nolan not having a smartphone? Because it's so counterintuitive. And it's also, I think, a question for all of us to ask is, are we distracted with technology? Does that get in the way of doing what we want to do? And even if it's not technology, are we just distracted in general walking around? I know, Rebecca, we had talked about, we stay to the end of the movies, to the very end. Sometimes there's an Easter egg, sometimes there's not. But you'd made a really interesting comment about the number of people working on the film. Do you remember what you had shared with us about that?
I pointed out to our cocooncast team how short the visual effects department listings were. And part of that was because Nolan is using exclusively practical effects on this movie.
Which means he's not using...
No computer-generated effects, no AI-driven effects or assets to be used in this movie.
Sure, and that would make sense. And it goes along with his movie-making philosophy, meaning when he wants to work with an actor, he calls them. An agent isn't calling them, he's calling them. And the scripts we talked about, he doesn't email them, he hand-delivers them to the person.
Nolan is a very good example of the practical ethos of movies are a community. And I'm not saying that Snyder doesn't create a community.
No, not at all.
Snyder is one of my favorite modern directors as well. But it's just interesting to see the artistic disparity that comes from these creative choices.
Correct. And it is, you said, one's not better over the other. It's just a point worth pondering. And how do you then apply it to yourself if you're not a, fancy Hollywood director, which I'm not. Thanks for joining us this week. We are always thrilled to create experiences that bring our cinema community together.
Next week, we're excited to be reviewing Barbie, as well as the new adaptation of Haunted Mansion.
Please like, subscribe, and share our channel.
If you enjoyed the show, you might want to check out last week where we reviewed Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Night and Day. Please send in your 60-second answer to our question. What was the first movie you saw in the theater?
Remember, cinema community, movies are
better together.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.